Today we're talking about variation. We're going to talk about direct variation, joint variation, and inverse variation. And honestly, this looks a lot harder than it is. If you just learn what a few specific keywords mean, this is really, really easy. The first part of this is just translating a mathematical sentence in words into a mathematical sentence of symbols. So these two statements mean the exact same thing. Y varies directly as X, and Y is directly proportional to X. The similarities in these two statements are the word directly, and these two statements both mean Y equals KX. K is a constant. We call it the constant of proportionality. It's also sometimes known as the constant of variation. There's always a constant number in these equations. So Y equals something times X. Directly basically means that you're going to be doing that constant number times something else. So you might want to jot down that directly means K times something. Here's an example of direct variation. The distance a spring is stretched from its natural length varies directly as the force on the spring. So if you exert a lot of force on that spring, you can stretch it a long distance. But if you only exert a little bit of force on the spring, you can only stretch it a little bit. And it varies directly. So there's a constant number in there that if you take, say, like, I'm going to exert 30 pounds per whatever, what distance will that string be able to be stretched? We can also do direct variation with an nth power. So again, these two statements mean the same thing. Y varies directly as the nth power of X. Y is directly proportional to the nth power of X. The important thing is that you see the word directly. Directly means K times something. So do you see how it's K times the nth power of X? One example of this type of variation is the area of a circle. A equals pi r squared. Pi is the constant, and then the area varies directly as the square of the radius. Inverse variation. Y varies inversely as X. Y is inversely proportional to X. The equation looks like Y equals K divided by X. So what do you suppose inversely means? Directly means K times something. Inversely means K divided by something. You can also have inverse variation with the square or with the nth power of something. So there's also the possibility of Y equals K divided by X to the nth. Again, if you see the word inversely, it means K divided by something. Whatever is described at the end of that statement, that's what it varies inversely by. That's what goes underneath. There's also joint variation. Z varies jointly as X and Y. Z is jointly proportional to X and Y. Jointly, honestly, is another way of saying directly. It's just there's multiple things that it varies directly with. It varies jointly with those things. So if you see jointly, it's going to mean K times a few things. Okay, so far we haven't written a whole lot. These slides have really been just informational. Let's go to the next slide. In example 1, we are going to try to translate these verbal phrases into mathematical statements with symbols and letters. V varies directly as the cube of E. So it says directly. What does directly mean? K times something. Afterward it says the cube of E. So that means we do K times E cubed. And what varies directly? V. So V equals KE cubed. I want you to try B on your own. I want you to take a risk, write something down, even if it's wrong. I want you to try, based on what we've talked about, see if you can figure out B. Okay, jointly is basically another way of saying directly. It just means there's multiple things that it's going to vary with. So Z is, that's the Z equals, jointly proportional, K times the square of X, X squared, and Y cubed, Y cubed. H varies inversely as the square root of S. Inversely means K divided by what? The square root of S, and that other letter is the other side of the equal sign. H equals K divided by the square root of S. There are 3 parts to this problem. The first part is take this statement, Y varies inversely as X, and write an equation, translate. Basically, the first step is translate. So we're going to say step A is to translate this into a mathematical sentence. Part B is to find the constant of proportionality. And part C is going to be to write an equation that relates the variables. So let's do part A, translate. Y varies inversely as X. What would that equation look like? Y equals K over X. Part B, they are going to give us some values that work in the equation. Y is 3 when X is 25. So we need to plug that in. Y is 3 when X is 25. How would we solve that equation to figure out what K is? Multiply 25 on both sides, we get 75 equals K. That's part B. So part A, translate it. Part B, figure out K. Part C is the part that everybody forgets to do. Part C is to write the equation using the K that we now know. So part C, we now know that K is 75, so Y equals 75 divided by X. The 2 boxed things are the things that they're really looking for. You have to do part A in order to get to part B and part C, but really part B and part C are the parts that they're asking for. Part B is just figure out what is K. Part C, use the K that we now know back in that original equation that we wrote. Replace the K with the K that you found. All right, let's try example 3. I made this one a little bit more complex on purpose. So part A, we need to translate P varies directly as X and inversely as the square of Y. There's a lot going on there. P varies directly. What does directly mean? K times what? X. And then it says inversely. Inversely means K divided by. We already have the K, so put the divided by underneath the K. Divided by Y squared. So even though that looks pretty complicated, was it really all that bad? No, it wasn't. Then they tell us some values. So for part B, I want you to plug those values in and figure out what K is. And then for part C, write an equation that relates the variables. So try this one on your own. Plug that in, figure out what K is, then write the equation. Okay, so plug in 12, 27, and 6. I'd multiply both sides by 36, then divide both sides by 27. I got 16 for my k. Really, this is the first answer that the problem is asking for. So they don't care about A, but you have to write out A in order to get the answer for B. So this is the first answer that they really care about. And then part C, now that you know that k is 16, rewrite that equation. P equals 16 times x divided by y squared. That's the other answer that they're looking for. So looking for what is k, and then the equation that uses that value of k that you found. Example 4, this is taking it a step further. Basically, part A is everything that we did on the previous slide. So take this situation, figure out what k is, write the equation using the value of k that you found. Then, how far will the ball roll during the first 3 seconds? So once you get that equation that has k in it, then people could ask you, okay, so if the ball rolling down the hill is directly proportional to the square of the time that it rolls, how far will it go in 3 seconds? How far will it go in 10 seconds? How far will it go in 15 seconds? You can then plug those values in and get the distance from the equation that you wrote. So we're not actually going to do that. I just wanted to talk about it. Here's your assignment, and we're changing this a little bit. We're going to do 25 through 29 all, except we're going to skip number 28. So basically I eliminated 28 and 30 to make it just a little bit shorter.